Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. It's been very clear over the last couple of days that Mario Cristobal, the Miami Hurricanes, are going to be major players in the transfer portal over the next couple of weeks. Want to do two things. One, dive into some of the targets, some of the players that the Miami Hurricanes are going after, but more importantly, have that conversation regarding which of these players and position groups should they be prioritizing the most in the transfer portal. I've been a large advocate that the spring transfer portal window should be used to fill in the cracks of your roster. Miami, not that many cracks in this roster. I've been extremely vocal that this is, in my mind, one of the better and more complete teams that you see not only in the ACC but in the country. But there are some positions that we might want to see Miami address. Want to get into it. Before we do, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. Massive shout out to the Miami Hurricane fans. Y'all continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the boys. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And much more importantly, would love to get some feedback from you guys as well in terms of what positions and players you would like to see the Hurricanes be prioritizing. And Dill, I'm going to kick it off with the most exciting player that we're going to talk about, former Oregon State running back Damien Martinez. Thoughts on the player, and then how should Miami prioritize this running back?
No, they should be going after him as hard as anyone. I think everyone in the country really should be going for him because there's just not that many running backs built like him, and especially when you're Miami and you want to run a very physical style of ball and play the way they play, I think you want a second one, especially when you have Mark Fletcher going into the season, possibly still kind of recovering from his injuries, and you got a big game right week one. You got to beat Florida, not only for playoff chances, but because you hate Florida. So I think this is an obvious one. I think most teams in the country would, and certainly a team that wants to run as much and as physically as Miami wants to, they should be going.
When the news first came out that Miami was going after Damien Martinez, I, along with a lot of the Miami Hurricane fans that you guys put in the comment section, were like, should Miami be going after Damien Martinez when they have other positions that we need to address? I think all of us over the last couple of days and really the last week were like, all right, we're on board with Damien Martinez. I mean, this is a guy that is arguably top 5 running back in the country heading into 2024. But Dill, I think you said it perfectly. I think he fits exactly how Miami wants to run the football heading into 2024, and largely like the missing piece of the puzzle for this Miami Hurricanes offense, right? Quarterback, check. Cam Ward, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. The wide receiver room, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, I think is very, very good. All behind a phenomenal offensive line. You look at Damien Martinez running the rock in the backfield. You think about opposing defenses having to tackle Mark Fletcher and Damien Martinez 35-plus times a game. Talk about wearing down defenses. I think this one makes a ton of sense, not only from a position fit, but how Miami wants to do things on the offensive side of the football. I'm prioritizing Damien Martinez, and if I'm Mario Cristobal, I'm trying to lock this one up. Dill, pushing your chips into the middle of the table. We've talked about this for this Hurricanes program. 2024 can be special. Go get all the weapons that you can get to really make 2024 a special season for the Hurricanes. Now, Dill, next target that I want to talk about, Sam Brown, Houston wide receiver, getting a lot of traction with the Miami Hurricanes. I'll give you the first word here.
I will say I think wide receiver is far less of a priority than what running back is, just because, again, what we kind of talked about, Fletcher kind of nursing his injuries, but also wanting to be able to run the ball physically and have a little more depth there. I don't think wide receiver is necessarily a high priority, but again, if Sam Brown wants to be at Miami, he's not a guy you say no to because he's really, really good. Now, if this is like some of these other wide receivers in the portal who couldn't quite crack it at their school or were really like good at a MAC school or something, I don't know that Miami necessarily needs to take a wide receiver like that. But if you got a guy in Sam Brown who's played really big time football, you just can't pass him up. He's too good.
I got some serious heat in the comment section a couple weeks ago as we've talked about targets for the Hurricanes, saying I look at that wide receiver room and say I think that is just fine heading into more than just fine. I think it's a very good wide receiver room, especially with what you just saw from Isaiah Horton last week in the spring game. Now, for the Miami Hurricane fans, the conversations that we had, what does a wide receiver in the portal look like for Miami? Sam Brown's what it looks like, right? 6'2", 195, a guy that ran a 4.45 coming out of high school. So he gives you that vertical, big body boundary threat, and then produced at the Power 5 level at Houston in the Big 12 last year. We talked about what kind of wide receiver would it be? A big body on the boundary that's proven production at the college football level. Sam Brown does check all those boxes. Now, I think the conversation you have is if it's between Sam Brown and going out and making some of those moves at the defensive back room. I personally lean defensive back room, but Dill, like you said, Sam Brown, a guy that's really hard to say no to. Moving on to the defensive line that has kind of become a priority for the Miami Hurricanes with Jared Harrison-Hunt transfer now. I'll give you the first word on Simeon Barrow here.
Again, another position that I think you want to add some more experience because, again, you kind of look, you have some guys coming up like Justin Scott and Armando Blunt, and you have a fair amount of proven guys, but you don't necessarily have that one big horse. And with that, I think you do want to be really deep. You want to be able to keep guys fresh. So to add a guy like Simeon Barrow, who's played a lot of football and played at a pretty high level, I mean, he's not like a dominant transfer in, but a really, really solid player. I do think you could definitely take a look at him. Again, I don't think this defensive line room is necessarily a huge need. They have a bunch of guys. Marley Cook, I think, is really good. CJ Clark, you know what you have with him. And then you have some unknowns like Anthony Campbell and some of the young guys to give you maybe some more firepower. I think Campbell played great in the spring game personally. But I do think it's not a bad thing to add another body just to keep that depth going and be able to rotate really effectively.
Anthony Campbell. I'll give a shout out. Anthony Campbell looked really good in the spring game. I think he's got all the traits to really be a potential guy that we didn't talk about at all during spring practice and be a guy that contributes for this Hurricanes program. I kind of echo your sentiments. I think this defensive line on the inside is very deep. I think you have your star power at the edge position, guys like Ruben Bay and Akeem Mesidor. Now, Simeon Barrow, a guy, what intrigues me about him is that you don't really have a huge pass rush presence on the inside, right? Marley Cook is kind of that guy that can give you some pass rush presence on the inside. CJ Clark, not so much. Simeon Barrow Jr., 17 quarterback hurries, a 14% pass rush win rate from the inside. He's not necessarily that eating up double teams kind of guy. He's a penetrator. He can give you that pass rush juice. So you do kind of maybe want to add a guy like that. So that would make sense.
Because that does round you out a little bit. I think you're right. I mean, you have a lot like CJ Clark, big body run stuffer, Gore, some of those other guys, more physical, just like your down and down out dirty work defensive tackles. But I think you're right. When we talk about like replacing a guy like Leonard Taylor, you want a little bit more firepower. Justin Scott will certainly be in the running to kind of give you that. But a guy like Simeon Barrow, like you said, who can rush the passer a little bit better, does round out the skill set in that room a little more.
Yeah, and we said it at the beginning of the transfer portal season, I guess you'd say. Like Mario Cristobal is not going to miss out on an opportunity to get the line of scrimmage play right. Now, Dill, going back to the position that we want to see Miami add to the most, and I've been so vocal. Like I think this Miami Hurricanes team is really one of the more complete rosters, not only in the ACC, but in the country. I think they check a lot of boxes that you want to see from a national championship contending team. The big question mark I have is in the defensive back room, and this is the position that I'm prioritizing the most. All of the guys that we talked about, I like, would be fired up, and Miami added them. Nothing's going to fire me up more than adding a few veteran defensive backs. I first want to give you the first word on Lorando Snacks Johnson, coming over from Arkansas.
And this is, again, the type of guy I think you really would like to add. Just somebody to raise that floor in that room, yes, aside from Porter, because you kind of know what you have with him. And aside from that, you have a lot of young, really talented players. But again, if you even go back to like where Michigan was last year, you hear a lot, oh, there's this guy coming up, that guy coming up. Well, until you're out there, you really don't know. And they go in and get a guy like Lorando Johnson and Josh Kelly, really experienced player, to just raise that floor. And he didn't need to be Will Johnson. They don't need to add that. I think Daryl Porter's a really, really good player, but you do want that second corner to raise the floor in that room. And again, if one of your young guys beats him out, that's awesome. That means you have a really highly talented, skilled football player. But if you don't bring in something else, you just naturally have a lot of
you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket of guys that you haven't seen play a ton. And I mean, we talked about what kind of defensive back should Miami be going after. It shouldn't be the Kamani McLeans, right? Kamani McLean is not proven at the college football level. You have to go get a guy that has shown he can play at a high level at the Power 5 level. A guy like Lorando Johnson, over 1,400 snaps between his years at Baylor and Arkansas, kind of checks those boxes. And Dill, I think that's a great way. Josh Wallace, very similar situation where we just go get a veteran cornerback that's shown they can do it at the college football level and was a large part of Michigan winning a national championship. Last guy that I think is really interesting, and interesting for a couple different reasons. Donnie Hill, obviously very familiar with the Miami coaching staff coming from Marshall. This is kind of my Josh Wallace for the Miami Hurricanes, right? Plays at the group of 5 level, plays extremely well at the group of 5 level. Another guy that proven production at the college football level raises the floor of what this Miami Hurricanes defensive back room is.
And then you just got to believe in Guidry and his staff to like be able to identify that, okay, this guy worked at Marshall. He can work at Miami. They know, I think he should know how to like kind of cross-assess, if you will, as well as anyone, just given where he came from. And again, if Guidry likes him, I like him. And I think it does, again, do what you want to do in Miami, which is give you somebody who you can kind of count on, and you know he's been really good at college level.
Agreed. I think these are kind of the perfect guys for the Miami Hurricanes to go after. I'm really interested to see which defensive backs they go after because I think they could do work at the quarterback spot, the safety spot. We'll continue to keep you guys updated as Mario Cristobal starts to work through the portal. Again, no doubt in my mind, Miami's going to be doing work. We'll be continuing to cover it. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.